Some years ago, a woman was walking through the market holding her son's hand. She had lost her husband. She had lost her daughter in famine of sorts. The only thing that she had left was the son, 15 years of age. And she was enormously attached to him. He was her life. He was her God. That's the only thing she worshipped, her son. And like any good mother, when you have such an altar, sacrificing is not going to be difficult. You sacrifice your time for your son. You sacrifice your money for your son. You sacrifice your life for your son. Every mother eventually becomes a sacrificial lamb that gives up everything about herself for the benefit of her child. One day, as again they're holding hands and they're walking the market, the son drops to the ground. At first, she imagines that this is a trick. She looks at him and she says, son, you, get up. He remains unmoved. People gather around her. They try to bring him back to life, but to no avail. He's dead. You know, if you have an umbilical cord, which happens just to be your son, and he is the source of everything, your life, your identity, your meaning, he makes up your world. The moment you lose your son, you're not just losing a son, you're losing meaning, you're losing identity. It's the only relationship worth having, and you've lost that. And all of a sudden you find yourself, as Galileo suggested, the earth is a speck of dust in the middle of nowhere. You know, the woman, this mother has lost her GPS. She's a speck of dust in the middle of nowhere. For whom should I cook now? Whose hands am I going to hold? I'm going to clean the house for who? Whose laundry am I going to wash? She has nothing now. And the problem with grief is that it gets you to this place where, like Job, you say, I want to die. Life is just not worth living. Nothing means anything. So one day, as she's about to just take her own life, she hears a knock on the door, and she opens the door. Her friend looks at her and says, did you know that we have a magician in our town whose name is the Buddha, or Jesus in the Gospel of John? He is a magician. He can raise the dead. He can heal the sick. He can give vision to the blind. At first she says, no, it's impossible. No, I have seen it with my own eyes. Who is he or she? He's some guy, you know, who sits over there in the town. His name is the Buddha. Really, he can do that? Yeah. So she goes to the Buddha. Of course, grief is stricken. And she says, I've been told that you can bring people back to life. Is it true? Yes. And man, she's happy. And she cries. And you would think that the Buddha would be overcome by the grief of this old woman. He's not. I mean, that's a crappy place to be as a wisdom teacher. A mother comes to you and says, my son has died. And she's screaming and wailing and tearing her clothes. And you just sit there, look at her. And he says to her, you're very selfish. What do you mean I'm selfish? You're selfish. I'm a mother. It's the selfishness that blinds you. You have to be profoundly cruel to look at a mother and speak to her in such a cold, callous way. She says, I've been broken by the gods, I've been broken by life. My son was the only meaning I had in life. And the gods or life took him from me. Bring him back to life. When you internalize grief and when you internalize brokenness in the wrong way, you become profoundly self-centered. You become a narcissist. It's all about you. It's about your happiness. It's about your success. It's about your failures. And when everything gets focused on you, you miss the big picture. What's the big picture? The human condition. So this is what the Buddha tells us. Now remember, when you're broken in the wrong way, it means that everything revolves around you. It's your grief, but you never examine the anatomy of grief itself. How did you become grief-stricken? You lost your son, but you never really examine what it means to have a child and whether or not children really belong to parents. Why did you have children? Because you never really examined sex and why people have sex. And you never really examined attraction. You never really examine why we desire. You never examine what it means to be human. All you know is my son died. I'm sad, I'm sorrowful, I want to kill myself, help. And good teachers will never give in to your infantile emotions. You're fully justified to have those emotions because they are devastating. A therapist will entertain your emotions. A therapist will refer you to books, not the Buddha. You know what he says to her? I once had a mother too. I left her. and I don't care. I had a father as well, left him too. People come to me with all sorts of problems. I don't care for their problems. Problems can only be solved if they're able to look at it the right way. And the woman says, well, what are you talking about? Are you able to look at problems the right way? My son is dead, bring him back to life. He looks at this woman and says, are you stupid? Am I speaking French to you? I'll do anything, she says. And he asks, are you sure? Yeah, I'll do anything. Okay. We have a town of 500 people. There are about 500 houses in this town. Knock on every single door. Every single door. And when someone opens a door, look them in the eye and ask, have you ever suffered a loss? If you find a single human being who has suffered no losses, I'll bring your son back. And you know, when you're self-centered, your vision is foggy. You can't see things clearly. Someone comes to my office and says, my boyfriend left me. What else did you expect? They'll either leave you physically, or they'll leave you emotionally, or they'll leave you intellectually. Eventually, you are the way you've always been, alone. You have a companion who can entertain you for about 5-6 hours a day, then the rest is on your own. What the hell are you talking about? My boyfriend left me. So she starts knocking door after door after door after door. And then after 2, 3, 4, 5 years, she goes back to the Buddha. And the Buddha says, I am ready to bring your son back to life. But remember, it was conditional. Give me the address and the name of the person who has never suffered a loss. And the woman looks at him and says, there was no one. Everybody either lost a parent or a pet or a son or a husband or a wife or a grandparent. Everybody has lost someone. But you see the journey. The Buddha didn't teach her anything. What the Buddha did, wanted to make sure that she understands what it means to be broken and how she can deal with brokenness in the right way. Everybody suffers a loss. Everybody's always in a grieving mode. Everybody tries to distract themselves without becoming completely broken and paralyzed. We are in the business of distraction. Just distract yourself in a healthy way. If you're born, you will get old, you will get sick, and you will die. And you don't have to wait till you're 90 to get old. Sometimes you can be a 5-year-old and you can see your dad beating up your mom and it ages you. You can see your parents divorce and it ages you. You can see your kid brother die and it ages you. People age in all sorts of ways. People get sick emotionally, physically, intellectually, spiritually. Everybody suffers a loss. And after 5 years, 6 years, 10 years, this woman going on this journey, she comes to realize she has every right to be sad and sorrowful. But the truth is, to be human is to be sad, is to be sorrowful. And then she goes home and she has a cow. She feeds the cow. She wakes up in the morning and the cow is dead. And she says, life gives and life taketh away. She's been broken in the right way. She doesn't need therapy. She doesn't need medication. She understands. That's your Messiah, understanding. All good teachers only provide for you a physical space. And that physical space is so potent that there are certain emotions that come out of you, certain thought processes that come out of you. And they protect those things day after day after day after day until you become mature. Once you reach understanding, nothing can touch you. It doesn't mean you won't be sad. It doesn't mean that you won't be broken. But brokenness will be a source of creativity. You will begin to think and reflect and understand.